appreciate you all taking the time to come and meet our office. We feel it's really important for you to get to know us and for us to get to know you as well. District Attorney Tom Walsh and Chief Assistant District Attorney Patrick Farley have provided tireless leadership to the Rockland County District Attorney's Office. The past almost 2 years since DA Walsh took office in January 2020 has provided our office with many unforeseen challenges. For instance, major crimes in Rockland County has increased, unfortunately, dramatically. You'll hear a little bit more about that from First Assistant District Attorney Dominic Crispino. Criminal justice reform has changed the way district attorneys' offices conduct business in New York State and in Rockland County as well. Nick Nikolakis will explain to you some of the discovery burdens that our overworked prosecutors now have to deal with and how it's changed our office on a daily basis. Bail reform is also has had effect upon our workload. While maybe good intentioned, it has allowed career criminals to go back on the street, thereby increasing our workload by having to prosecute the same people over and over as they go in and out of the justice system. We are all still dealing with the opiate crisis here in Rockland County, the silent killer that's taking our friends, families, and neighbors. You'll hear from First Assistant District Attorney Judge Chuck Apothecary about some of the programs that the District Attorney's Office has to try to provide rehabilitation for people in need. And then to top it all off, of course, we all had to deal with the worldwide pandemic. When the world stopped because of coronavirus, the Rockland County District Attorney's Office remained open for business. Both DA Walsh and Chief Farley did not miss one day of work during the pandemic, and they ensured that justice in Rockland County was never quarantined. District Attorney Tom Walsh is a tireless advocate for the people of Rockland County. He works around the clock to ensure that justice is served without fear or favor. So now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to my boss and friend, and all of your friend too, Tom Walsh.
Good morning, everyone, and Barbara, thank you for those kind words. I wasn't quite sure at first that she was talking about me, but thank you. Well, fellow community workers and leaders, welcome to our first annual breakfast, legislative breakfast. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to be with us today. We had hoped to start this last year, but that COVID thing got in the way. We are very thankful to see you all in person and finally be able to start this initiative. Now, unfortunately, many people do not understand the role of a prosecutor. TV shows such as Law and Order kind of help tell people what a prosecutor does. And it's helped shine light on the work of a district attorney. But we really need to do much more work in that regard. And that is our goal this morning, to provide insight into the operation of the Rockland County District Attorney's Office, as well as presenting our hardworking, underpaid, overworked staff. Now these demonstrations, legislators, did you hear that part? Okay. These presentations will demonstrate how bureaus work collectively in the DA's office to successfully prosecute cases and protect the rights of the innocent. Since Turnabout is fair play, we hope to hear from you, our county leaders, on how we may better serve the unique and diverse people of Rockland County while promoting justice. We need to work together to provide a criminal justice system that is fair and just to all, where prosecution is based only on facts and done without fear or favor. A system that works tirelessly to stop drug trafficking without any hesitation and truly aids and helps those addicted to recovery. I want to thank you for your attendance today, and please enjoy the presentation and the food. Thank you all for coming.
Hi, good morning. My name is Nabila McLeod. I'm an Executive Assistant District Attorney here at the DA's office, And I've been here for 15 years, but DA Walsh and Chief Frawley are my favorite administration. All right, so I'm going to give you a very brief, bare bones presentation on grand jury. Grand jury is pretty complex. On top of that, it's really a secret proceeding, so I will give you a kind of a gist of how grand jury works and how a typical case works and what happens when an indictment, how we get indictments. So, all right. So, what is the grand jury? Grand jury is basically an accusatory body. There are 23 members and citizens from Rockland County. They come in to convene at the grand jury room, and they make up the grand jury. And what does the grand jury do? So the grand jurors come in, and they consider evidence against a person or persons to determine whether criminal charges should be brought against them. Typically, these are felonies. These are your homicides, your rape, assault, public corruption, these type of cases, wiretaps. And the grand jury is, as I said, different than a regular trial jury. So because at a trial, you're looking to have a different set of jurors, a petit jury. So before I go into that, a grand jury's purpose is to indict people or take other actions. I'm going to start with what is an indictment. So an indictment, right here I wrote it down, it's basically an accusatory instrument. The indictment will list the crimes that the person has been charged with, and the standard of proof for grand jury is different than that of a trial. The standard of proof in grand jury is reasonable cause to believe that a felony has been committed and that a person has committed such a felony. And there are a few steps that a grand jury can take. I'll mention two of the most common ones. The number one is a true bill. The true bill is just another word for an indictment. When the grand jurors have heard evidence presented, they can then vote to indict someone. But at the same time, they can also vote not to indict someone, and that is called a no bill. So our goal is to make sure when cases are presented to a grand jury that we provide only cases that have the reasonable cause standard met. We do not just frivolously put cases before a grand jury in order to get an indictment. And the grand jury is kind of like a screening process in the beginning when a case first starts. I know a lot of people have heard that, the anecdote or the joke that, even a ham sandwich can be indicted. That is not the case. There is actually a lot of evidence that goes in before a grand jury before someone can be indicted. And there are times when cases are no-billed as well. When a case is no-billed, that charge is dismissed. And unless there is new evidence or other circumstances where we can come back to the grand jury with that evidence, that case is dismissed. So we take very careful precautions to make sure that we present all the relevant evidence before the grand jury. As I said, the grand jury is a secret proceeding. There are several differences between the grand jury and a petit jury, which is a trial jury. So you can go on the website and find out what cases are actually being presented in open court. And it is open to the public. If you want to go and sit down and listen to other cases, you are free to do that. That is different from a grand jury proceeding. A grand jury proceeding is secret. Nobody knows what cases are being presented to the grand jury. Nobody knows the witnesses that are coming forward, and there are many reasons for that. And the reasons for that is to maintain the integrity of the grand jury. There are several cases that go in sometimes, like public corruption cases, wiretap cases, where we cannot have the public knowing what witnesses are coming forward, undercover agents that come in. Sometimes we have domestic violence witnesses that come in, child witnesses that come in. For those reasons, it is different than a petit jury. Grand jurors are made up of 23 jurors. When you go to trial, you have 12. In the grand jury, there is no judge present. And of course, in a courtroom, there is a judge. There is no judge, and in fact, the ADAs, the assistant district attorneys, we are the legal advisors. And it is our job to make sure that the relevant evidence comes in and is presented to the grand jury, and we keep out the evidence that is prejudicial. So we are the ones that maintain this, the integrity of the grand jury in that way. And of course, everything is being recorded and is turned over to the judge and the defense after that to make sure that we are doing the right thing. Grand jurors can also ask questions of witnesses, which if you're on a trial you cannot do. And one of the biggest things is grand jurors, they are not deciding if someone is guilty or not guilty. They are simply deciding if there is enough evidence for a case to go to court. And they don't have to be unanimous also, like a trial jury. This is, I want to thank Nick for giving me this great little background in the back, but I'm going to tell you what a typical grand jury case is like. This is a robbery. You have a victim who is perhaps on the street, and a stranger comes up to them, robs them at gunpoint, and then runs away. The victim then calls the police and says, that person robbed me and they went that way. The police finds the person, matching the description, finds the proceeds of the robbery and perhaps the gun as well. For a typical case like that, at trial there would be many different witnesses. But for a grand jury, because of the lower standard of proof, we would have only probably 2 witnesses. We would have the victim come in, and the victim would testify as to what happened. The police officer would come in and testify as to arresting someone and recovering a gun. And there would probably be some photographs of injuries, there would be medical records, and that would be the extent of the grand jury presentation. After that, we charge them on the law. We tell them this is what you are to consider. Please consider indicting this person on robbery, and this is the definition. Everyone then leaves, and the grand jury conducts a secret vote whether to indict or not to indict. So that's pretty much typically how a grand jury case goes. So we had a lot of challenges when during last year's pandemic, when COVID was, really rampant. Typically, we indict about 450 cases. It was very, very different last year. The numbers went down dramatically, and the reason for that is because we were not allowed to bring grand juries in because of safety reasons. So many things happened in that case. We had a lot of crime being committed where people were in jail and could not have their cases heard by the grand jury. We also had crime victims who needed the cases to go forward and were not able to do that. When we did get grand juries in, unfortunately, somebody would contract COVID and then they'd have to quarantine. So it was very, very challenging. But throughout it all, we still kept the grand jury running for as long as we could. There were times where we were instructed that we were not bringing grand juries in. But slowly but surely, we've been having them come in and conducting business with them. So I'm going to wrap up now, but when a new grand jury comes in, DA Walsh always comes in and greets them, and he always tells them that the grand jury is the guardian of the courthouse gate. They decide who is indicted and who is not indicted. So they have a very, very big responsibility, as do we, when we present cases to them in order to get an indictment. They are the initial checks and balances. Without them, we could not prosecute cases and help crime victims while also protecting the rights of the accused. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Dominic Crispino. I'm a first assistant district attorney, and I've been in the office for, I guess, almost 19 years, with a little hiatus. But I'm back, and I am in charge of the Major Offense Bureau, Major Crimes Bureau, and a couple other bureaus. Basically, we handle the big cases, the murders, the kidnappings, the burglaries, the robberies, all the good stuff, or the bad stuff, depending on how you look at it. We take an active role in cases almost from the beginning. So once a crime happens, the police usually call us, and we start heading out to scenes. So again, like I said, we handle all major offenses. We mentor the younger assistants. We try to help them along. We try to mentor them into learning how to do cases the way we do them, and to hopefully get them into our bureau later on in their careers. We prepare cases. We prepare investigations. We counsel and advise, and that's pretty much right away. We counsel and advise police at crime scenes on certain things, also other EDAs. And like I said, we provide crime scene assistance. For every murder case, especially since DA Walsh and Chief Furley have taken over, we've gone to every single homicide scene. And as we'll get into, there's been a ton of them since they've taken over. The staff that we have, typically, we are the most experienced in the office. We've lost some experience over the years, and that's basically, it's the nature of the game here in the prosecutor's office. People leave, there's not enough, the salaries aren't high enough, and they typically leave. Hopefully we can change that one day. We're accustomed to dealing with the most complex cases in the office. We have a variety of pressure-filled duties, and we perform our duties mostly, a lot of times at night. We're ready to go 24 hours a day, 7 days a week if we have to. Like I said, we're the most seasoned and experienced prosecutors. We have a wide variety of experience, and that's, we know about DNA, we know about psychology, we know about ballistics and all that kind of stuff. And DA Walsh and Chief Frawley have made sure that we get all that training. Like I said, we represent the county in prosecuting the most serious criminals, so we take this job very seriously. The function of major crimes, like I said, is the basic function is case enhancement. We need to enhance cases from the beginning. That's why Chief Frawley and DA Walsh have us out there. We are with the police officers. We're working hand in hand right when the crimes are committed. We are advising them. We want to make the case better because ultimately the goal is to get a conviction at trial. And that's why we take an active role right away. Like I said, we are on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Typically perform our duties in the late evening or early morning hours. And I'm repeating myself here. Now, we also take an active role with other bureaus in this office. We work hand in hand. A lot of times cases spill into different bureaus. So we might have a sex crimes case that spills into a major crimes case, and we work actively hand in hand, which is good because we all have a good relationship with each other. Since DA Walsh has taken over, there has been, and I don't know what the reason is, maybe it's COVID, maybe it's bail reform, there has been a major increase in the homicides. I'm putting 2019 in here, then the late 2019 in here, just to show you what we've been dealing with. Since 2019, these are all the homicides that have happened. This is pretty much since December, since the Grafton Thomas case that happened in Muncie with the machete. This is what we've been dealing with on the homicides. It's been non-stop. We're equipped to handle it. We have enough ADAs, I guess, at this point to handle it. We're doing a good job, but I'm afraid that as time goes on, we're going to be in trouble. Because almost every single one of these cases is pending. The homicides aren't stopping. The trials aren't going. So eventually, it's going to catch up where we're going to be doing all these trials, and we're going to have homicides coming in, and there's going to be so much work for the Bureau and for the office. I'm not sure how we're going to be able to handle it. Those are just the solved homicides, by the way. Sorry. These are the unsolved homicides. We have 7 unsolved homicides in Rockland County. I've never seen that before. I've been here for, like I said, for 19 years. 7 unsolved homicides. So there's people out there who committed all these crimes and that have not been held accountable, have not been arrested, and these crimes have not been solved. They range from mostly Spring Valley. There's one in Haverstraw, and there's one in Nyack. That's what we're dealing with here. So as you can see, we've been very, very, very busy throughout the years. Again, this is just to show you, these are the pending homicides. I put the 2018 case in there, Hakeem Gentles, because that's pending trial, so we still have to do it. So these are all the cases, September, December of 19, then we get February of 2020, May of 2020, August, November, March of this year, June of this year. Those are all the homicides that were solved. And these are the ones that are unsolved. And as you can see, we've been busy, we've been out, we've been to so many autopsies and so many crime scenes. It's really a shame. So the stats. This is what's pending right now for trial for the major offenses. 12 homicides and attempted homicides. Never had that before. And it's just building up, building up, building up, because we're not doing trials, really. We're actually on trial right now for the first time. We're doing our first jury trial. That's where I'm going right after this. And that's not going the way I would want it to go. You have to see the way the courtroom's set up because of COVID. I don't believe we can effectively pick a jury with the way the new COVID restrictions are. We're not allowed to hand evidence and show the evidence to the jury. We're not allowed to speak to them without masks. They can't speak to us without masks. We can't pick proper juries. I think this could have an effect on all the major crimes and all the crimes in Rockland County. We may lose cases, and we may lose cases because of COVID restrictions in the courtroom. We don't. There's no money. The courts say they have no money for face shields, so everyone's wearing a mask. It's not a good sight for the trial, and we'll see what happens. So, 12 pending in county court, 7 unsolved. So that's 19 homicides or attempted homicides that we have to deal with coming up. And then, like I said, we've only been able to close four major crimes, homicides or attempted homicides, in 2 years. That's it. Everyone else is just waiting for trial. And they're waiting for trial because as the case gets older, our case gets weaker. So these defense attorneys are not pleading guilty. They're waiting, they're hoping our witnesses disappear, they're hoping our evidence disappears, and they're not taking pleas. That is basically, I have the facts of every single case that's pending here. I don't want to bore you with all that. I appreciate your time.
My name is Kathleen Devlin. If you can't all tell, we're not exactly comfortable with this whole microphone thing because we're all used to throwing our voices right to the back of the room. So before I even get started, I want to tell you guys a little bit about what special victims means here in Rockland County. So I know we all see TV shows, we see Mariska Hargitay on NBC every Thursday night, and special victims for their purposes means exclusively sex crimes. That's not what it looks like here in Rockland County. Here in Rockland County, the special victims umbrella covers a much broader topic of crime. So what does the Special Victims Unit in Rockland County prosecute? We prosecute the physical and sexual abuse of children. We prosecute sexual assaults. We're responsible for domestic violence cases. We're responsible for human trafficking, internet crimes against children, as well as crimes against the vulnerable or the elderly. So in much larger offices, such as New York County, Bronx County, they have the ability and the staff to separate these specializations into separate units. But unfortunately, we don't have the luxury of doing that here in Rockland County. So I don't think I'm going out on a limb in saying that the Special Victims Unit is the busiest unit in Rockland County. And I know you all look at me and you probably think, well, I don't hear about that. Because special victims, aside from murder, is the ugliest stuff society sees. It's the stuff that the media doesn't really want to talk about. Because although it's sexy for all of us to see on TV, we don't all like to hear that our neighbor next door is sexually abusing his or her niece or nephew. So I thank everyone for sitting here and listening to me today to kind of open your eyes a little bit to see what's actually going on right here under all of our noses. So our Special Victims Unit operates out of our Special Victims Center. We are currently located in Building K in Pomona. For some of you who've been around a while, you probably recall that, and Legislator Grant would know this, that we were once upon a time located on the campus of Good Samaritan Hospital. But during 2018-2019, we simply outgrew our facility there. And so the county opens up an entire new building to us at Building K. So before I give you the ins and outs of Building K and what goes on there, I want to tell you a little bit about the people that staff my unit, because God knows I couldn't do it by myself. So I obviously run the unit, and I have a full-time assistant district attorney assigned to me, as well as 2 additional assistant district attorneys. Each of us carries a pretty decent-sized caseload. Mostly what we prosecute are felonies. Some of the other assistants assigned to the unit handle high-profile misdemeanors, and we all also handle sex offender proceedings. Special victims cases are the most likely to go to trial or to take a plea immediately before trial. So the attorney assigned that case still has the responsibility of working up the matter as if it was going to go to trial. Now, why do these cases go to trial more than anyone else? People don't report domestic violence or sexual assault right away. These crimes don't often have witnesses other than the person who was the victim of the offense. There's not often a lot of evidence, and that's directly related to the fact that people don't disclose it right away to law enforcement. And quite honestly, these cases go to trial because who really wants to be a registered sex offender? In addition to our felony caseload, we have, I believe, 19 justice courts here in Rockland County. Each of those jurisdictions also has special victims cases, lower level misdemeanor and violation offenses. While each of those justice courts has an assigned ADA, the 4 attorneys assigned to special victims are also actively involved in the investigation and the prosecution and review of those cases. So it's fair to say that special victims is always moving. Now, going back to our location at Building K in Pomona. So our Special Victim Center is first and foremost a child advocacy center. What is a child advocacy center? I'll call it a CAC because I'm eventually going to stumble over the term. A CAC is essentially one-stop shopping for victims of crime. So at our CAC in Rockland County, we have members of the District Attorney's Office, a specialized trauma team from Child Protective Services. We have the Center for Safety and Change located on site. Members of our local law enforcement are in and out the door every single day. And we also have a fully functional examination room that is staffed several times a month by members of the Westchester Institute for Human Development from Westchester Medical Center. In addition to all of that, and our fully functional exam room, we also have 3 hardwired interview rooms. What does that mean? That means that the rooms that we interview witnesses in have video and audio recording capability, but they also have the ability to live stream our interviews to several locations throughout Building K that allow our interviews to be observed. And the whole purpose of doing that, the whole purpose of operating in this multidisciplinary format is so that we can reduce the trauma that our victims sustain. We share information, we work as a team, we are more effective, and hopefully we can make what our victims and our witnesses went through a little less difficult to face every single morning. So everyone who interviews a child at Building K, whether it's an assistant district attorney, a police officer, or a member of Child Protective Services, all of us are trained and have completed a New York State sanctioned course in forensic interviewing. What is that? Forensic interviewing is a style of interviewing children that involves non-leading, unsuggestive interviewing techniques so that we can get the most accurate information from our victims. Now, this whole model that I'm talking about a child advocacy center, a multidisciplinary team, we try to use this when it comes to all of our victims. We try to minimize the trauma for everyone, whether it's an adult domestic violence victim, an elderly person who's been abused by a family member. Ultimately, we want to make this experience as painless as possible for everyone that we come into contact with. So, since District Attorney Walsh came into office in 2020, we have since joined the New York State Police Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, and that is under the leadership of Lieutenant Marty Anson, who has taken over the law enforcement lead of the Special Victims Unit. So I know we all see on TV things about child pornography and child sexual exploitation, likely in movies or on special victims like I talked about. But how does this all come to be? How do these cases come to our attention? How do we learn about these things? So there is an organization nationally called the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So when organizations such as Facebook, Google, or a company like Verizon detects an image or an algorithm that something might be expletive about a child in nature is being put onto their system or their server, they notify this organization called NCMEC. And that information then trickles down to our local agencies. And in New York State, the main agency that oversees these things are the New York State Police. As you all can imagine, investigations, materials, cases involving the sexual exploitation of children are really, quite honestly, akin to a drug dealer. It's like a game of whack-a-mole. Once we take one out, 10 more are popping up. So there is far more work than the New York State Police can possibly handle. And prior to District Attorney Walsh coming into office, we did not have an affiliate agency here in Rockland County. So what did we do with DA Walsh's sanction? We joined up, and we are now the New York State Police's local agency that they refer their overflow to. What does that look like? That looks like Lieutenant Anson going out, meeting with people, writing search warrants with the assistance of our assistant district attorneys, and ultimately, what does it mean for us? It means more cases. So, in addition to the fact that we work with other agencies like the New York State Police, the Special Victims Unit of the DA's office also helps to train other agencies. So myself, as well as the attorneys that I supervise, assist the Rockland County Police Academy in training their cadets, their investigators, as well as doing their in-service training on topics such as child abuse, sexual assault, and domestic violence. I myself also assist the Center for Safety and Change in doing their semi-annual rape crisis counseling training, assisting, the victims that respond to hospitals and instructing their counselors about the law so that they're a little more informed when they respond to the hospital to aid victims. In addition to that, we also seek to aid our local educators in hosting functions. Members of the Special Victims Unit go to Pace Law, St. Thomas Aquinas, Rockland Community College, Dominican College to speak during the month of October, Domestic Violence Awareness Month, as well as during the second to last week of April, which is Victims Awareness Month. Just this past Friday, we actually hosted an event with the Department of Homeland Security to educate local law enforcement further on investigative techniques in human trafficking. Here are just some pictures from that event. It was pretty successful. I'd say we had about 70 or 80 members of local law enforcement turn out, as well as members of other agencies from our surrounding counties. So, needless to say, the Special Victims Unit of the Rockland County District Attorney's Office is pretty busy. I hope that if nothing else, you all learned a little bit more about what is going on in our community that perhaps we don't see in our newspapers and hear about otherwise. Thank you so much. At this time, I'd like to invite up Tina Guccione, who's going to speak about our Special Investigations Unit.
Tina Guccione, I'm an Executive Assistant District Attorney for the Rockland County DA's office. Currently overseeing the Special Investigations Unit in our office, as well as our Rockland County Narcotics Task Force. I've been a prosecutor for 24 years, so I've kind of pretty much done it all, and I have to say this assignment has been the most complex assignment that I've ever had, mostly because a lot of our cases are not, single robberies or single events. A lot of our cases deal with ongoing long-term fraud and long-term investigations. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about what our units do, the Special Investigations Unit and the Task Force, and then if I have time, go through a couple of the most significant cases that we've prosecuted since DA Walsh has taken office in 2020. So our Special Investigations Unit operates really as a conglomeration, a collaborative between many different forces that all work together to investigate and prosecute cases. So we have, you'll hear from Sergeant Earl Lawrence next, our Crime Analysis Center. We're all located on site at the 9th floor in Building A in Pomona. Crime Analysis Center assists us with a lot of the a lot of backgrounds on all of our defendants and witnesses. We have financial analysts, forensic analysis that can look at our bank records and all kinds of business records and follow the money, as we say in our unit. We have criminal investigators that are specifically assigned to the unit as well. Currently, we have 1.5 ADAs in addition to myself, always looking to get more. In addition, we have an ADA assigned to handle the narcotics task force cases. And we also collaborate very well with county agencies and the Office of the Attorney General. The kinds of things we investigate, mostly public corruption, organized crime cases, major financial crimes, some large-scale criminal events, I'll get to one of those in a little while, as well as crimes against state revenue. Those are crimes where somebody is stealing and it's literally coming out of the pockets of our taxpayers. One of our important collaborations, particularly with crimes against revenue, is with the Department of Social Services. So DSS handles all sorts of programs for welfare, for SNAP benefits, supplemental nutritional assistance programs, and things of the nature. But there's unfortunately a bunch of fraud that inherently goes along with it. For example, if a person fails to report their change of income, that may impact how much or whether or not they're entitled to get benefits. And the Department of Social Services will basically investigate and find what they call intentional program violations, people that are intentionally violating the program mandates through the Department of Social Services. Those are the cases that they will refer to us. We usually end up doing investigations with them, bank records, employment records, to see if we can substantiate the charges against the person, to see if we can substantiate that the county is being defrauded of money, and then we work jointly with the Department of Social Services to recover the benefits that are owed to Rockland County. Usually those are pretty much case-by-case basis, but we did recently have a more elaborate scam, which was a SNAP benefits scam. This case involved recipients who were entitled to SNAP benefits, and they had their welfare cards. However, they were giving their cards to our defendant, Mr. Manuel Diaz-Soriano, and they were basically getting money on the dollar, so 50 cents on the dollar, whatever it was. The benefit to the recipient is that they have cash in hand, and they can use the cash for anything, not just what SNAP benefits allows them to use their card for. The defendant takes the cards, and he was making multiple purchases at stores, buying other products, and then selling them again in his store. So our investigation identified 23 SNAP recipients who allowed their funds to be misused. We have an arrest pending against Mr. Soriano, and the Department of Social Services is working with those 23 recipients to make sure that they are, the county is made whole. One of the other collaborations that we have is with the Office of the Inspector General. The Office of the Inspector General has their own investigators. They investigate crimes against state revenue, such as welfare fraud, workers' compensation fraud, prevailing wages if somebody doesn't pay county employees for county jobs in the proper way, and also unemployment benefit scams. So if somebody's on receiving unemployment benefits due to an injury or a disability, and it turns out that that's not accurate, or if a company has employees but they don't obtain proper workers' compensation insurance, all of that, if there's an injury on the job, if there's somebody receiving benefits that they shouldn't receive, that all literally takes money out of the pockets of our citizens in the state. So we look to work with them actively to recover some of those. Before I get to my major cases, I do want to give a shout out to my chief who's here, Chief Pete Walker. Kind of keeps it all together for all of us. We all work together, as well as Earl Lawrence, and also I'll get to Matt Ryder, our narcotics task force. He's here as well, the director of our program. So some of the major cases that you may have heard about recently that came through came to the Special Investigations Unit was Leonard Scar. He was a funeral director in Suffern. Pretty much half my family was buried by his funeral home. But there was an investigation. It started out as a single complaint regarding somebody's funeral funds that were misappropriated. And through a long-term investigation with Round Pole Police Department, it turned out that Mr. Scar was routinely creating, supposedly, contracts for people to do pre-death benefits to basically pay for their funeral services in advance, but he was stealing the money. I think we ended up with 80 victims in that case that we were able to identify. We were able to identify a larceny of more than $530,000, and Mr. Scar was indicted on multiple felonies, pled guilty, and he's going to be making restitution to all his victims. He also, around the same time that he was getting in trouble, decided he wanted to sell the business. We were able to seek a civil forfeiture action so that we can be sure that any of the proceeds of the sale of that business can be used to ensure restitution for the victims. Another big case that we worked on recently was Matthew Gannon. He was with the Sloatsburg Ambulance Corps. And basically what he was doing was pilfering the money that was supposed to be for the Sloatsburg Ambulance Company for his own personal gain. Over the course of 5 years, he used funds to pay for his personal expenses, Jets tickets, his daughter's college, his internet, and I think his insurance. That investigation involved multiple state agencies to try and track the money, and also working closely with Ramapo Police Department. We ended up finding $79,000 in larceny by Mr. Gannon. He was indicted. The case was resolved with a guilty plea to the top charge and full restitution. We were seeking a state prison sentence. The judge has promised intermittent jail of 6 months, as well as restitution and 5 years probation and community service. His larceny basically almost shut down Sloatsburg Ambulance because he was stealing all the money. Similar, we have Christopher Now, who's with the Spring Valley Fire Department and the Columbia Fire Department. He was the long-term treasurer for those two departments, and he as well pilfered the money from their coffers, basically over the course of 5 years, paying for his personal expenses, cars and rents and things of that money, and just outright cash just taken right out of the system. The larceny is over $38,000, and that case is currently pending in indictment in county court. Another one that you probably heard about recently was Brian Downey. Mr. Downey, I believe, was the deputy mayor in Airmont. That case came by way, and I was talking with Chief Walker about it. It really demonstrated the importance of our collaboration with our partners that we have located at the Special Victims Center, Special Investigation Center. Basically, we had a package that had been identified from Homeland Security as having a firearm silencer in it. Through our connections with the United States Postal Service, we were able to figure out that he had gotten similar packages, similar markings, and all of that. And time was of the essence here because the silencer, which is illegal in New York, was being mailed to his home, was about to be delivered. So literally within 48 hours, we arranged to have a fake mailman deliver the package. We wrote search warrants for Mr. Downey's house. We collaborated with Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and we were able to get his prior shipment records so that we were able to get a search warrant for his home for more than just the one silencer that we knew he got. When we went into the house, we found basically a gun room. I think if you look on our website, there was postings of it. He had 21 assault weapons, 13 silencers, and a whole bunch of ammunition. So that case is currently in open felony complaints. The guns are being tested, the silencers are being worked on by the federal government to make sure they are in fact silencers and all of those things. But that was a huge case that really happened within a span of 48 hours in turnaround, from the day we got the silencer in the mail to the day we executed the warrant. Just recently, we announced an indictment that was more of a larceny case. Emily Dominguez, Luz Marina Gutierrez, and Janice Dominguez. Some of you may know Emily Dominguez from her work with the Haverstraw Neighborhood Fund, which was a charity that had been for years and years providing backpack services, Christmas dinners, Thanksgiving dinners, and that was all under the Rockland Community Foundation, which probably all of you know about, is a huge company, a huge organization that helps local nonprofits disperse the money and basically serve the citizens of Rockland County. Ms. Dominguez, her mother, and her sister, basically between 2017 and 2020, we discovered that they were stealing funds that should have been sent directly to the Rockland Community Foundation, that should have been benefiting the neighborhood, the Haverstraw Neighborhood Fund. We found about 3 or 4 different ways in which the larcenies were committed. Ms. Dominguez was submitting false receipts for reimbursements to the Rockland Community Foundation for meals and expenses that were never actually incurred. They were submitting falsely inflated receipts, so they were aggregating or submitting receipts for a reimbursement for more than what they had actually spent. And then there were 2 occasions or several occasions where Fundraisers were held, like Backpack Bingo, where they were trying to raise money for, supposedly for the Haverstraw Neighborhood Fund. The people that attended paid through PayPal, and instead of having the money go where it should have gone, directly to Rockland Community Foundation, it went through our analysis of bank records, it went into Emily Dominguez's own PayPal account and then directly into one of her savings accounts and was never given to the Haverstraw Neighborhood Fund. There were also other things like checks that she just got that people thought were going to Haverstraw Neighborhood Fund and Rockland Community Foundation that just ended up in her checking account. So we were able to identify over $11,000 in larceny. That case was indicted. It was a 35-count indictment. It's currently pending in county court. I think this is the last one. Okay, so most recently, you guys all probably heard about the fire, Evergreen Fire on March 23rd, 2021. We just recently resolved that case with an indictment. That was the result of a huge investigation involving several state and federal agencies. Numerous subpoenas were issued, numerous search warrants were issued, analysis of records, analysis of video, and ultimately we were able to get an indictment against Mr. Nathaniel and Aaron Sommer for 2 people that had passed away, the firefighter as well as one of the residents. And as well as some other indictments or other charges that were indicted involving serious physical injury to others and serious and physical injury to one. So just to kind of loop it around, some of these are the major cases that we're talking about. Ms. Nabila McLeod was telling you about grand jury. All of those major cases and all of the cases that Dom talks about as well ended up with indictments, which meant evidence had to go before the grand jury. ADAs had to gather all that evidence, work with police agencies to put it all together. I know that the Evergreen Fire, that presentation before the grand jury took over a week. The case I presented with Emily Dominguez took 2 full days in the grand jury. So there's a lot of work that goes into getting these indictments. I know the Leonard Scar case, I think, took about 3 or 4 days, full days in front of the grand jury. So they're very, very labor intensive. The other thing that happens on the 9th floor in Pomona is our narcotics task force, and our director, Matt Ryder, is here. That, again, is another collaborative, really well-functioning unit that operates because of the work of many different agencies and the collaboration of those agencies. Obviously, Rockland County, due to our closeness to New Jersey, Paterson, New Jersey, which is a huge drug hub, as well as New York City. Drugs don't just start in Rockland, but they come into Rockland and they're being just sold and used throughout the county. So because of our collaboratives with many different agencies, we're able to get a team together and basically have try and get a good handle on stopping the flow. So we work with the alcohol, tobacco, firearms. We work with all of our county police agencies. We have investigators on the scene with us. We work with New York City, their strategic intel unit, as well as New York State Police, Homeland Security, and the DEA. The way the task force gets it done, basically, is pretty much like a lot of our other investigations. However, we heavily use our confidential informants, which are people that sometimes have criminal charges pending against them. Sometimes it's people that just, have prior drug history and they want to right the wrongs and help clean up society. Some of our confidential informants have charges pending, other ones are just citizens. We have undercover police officers that go out into the field and are purchasing narcotics, trying to make connections with other agents, with other dealers and things of that nature. We rely heavily on our wiretap, our ability to get Title III wiretaps, search warrants. We use the Crime Analysis Center to do background checks on the area, on the people that we're investigating, on our sellers, as well as video and physical surveillance. So I'm almost done. A few of the major cases we've had through the task force is Darren Jemison. You've probably maybe heard about him, not sure. Darren was selling drugs in the Orangetown-Nyack area, selling guns. Our narcotics task force undercover officers were able to purchase 3 loaded handguns from him, one which was defaced. This was a collaborative effort with ATF and the United States Department of Justice, and ended up with a federal prosecution as well as a sentence. Gustavo Morales, you'll see that this sort of spans all of Rockland County in the Rampo Village of Suffern area in February. He was a dealer distributing pretty much anything you need, multiple kinds of illegal substances and guns, heroin, cocaine, prescription pills, and weapons. That case involved, we had a guilty plea on that case. He's serving 5 years in state prison and 3 years of post-release supervision. A wire case that we worked on out of the town of Clarkstown. in November of 2020 was a network of dealers. You know, it used to be a lot easier when people were using their cell phones and we can track calls and text messages, but now with WhatsApp and all these other applications that are instantly deleted, it's becoming more and more difficult to get into these networks when they're using telecommunications. This one was a wiretap, a successful one that involved the arrest of 10 people, recovery of all kinds of heroin, handguns, and everything else. We have open pending indictments. The two main players are Chardonnay and Rashid Harkham. Both of them are indicted, and Harkham is being prosecuted federally. In the town of Haverstraw, we have Daniel Santana. He was distributing cocaine in heroin in Ridge Street area. We got an indictment on him as well. That's open and pending in county court. So you can see that our task force basically spans the globe in terms of Rockland County. The work is everywhere and it's endless. And we also hope that through a lot of the prosecutions of the drug offenders, we can make the drugs less available, and therefore there could be less people who can have access to drugs. And that also works well with our alternative drug treatment programs that hopefully we can work to get some of the users of those narcotics treated.
My name is Earl Lawrence. I am a sergeant with the Clarkstown Police Department. I've been, can't believe I'm going to say this, coming up on 30 years in law enforcement. Myself and Pat Withers, wherever he is, we graduated the police academy together a long time ago from that building over there, the fire training center, the old police academy. With that, there's been a lot of changes over the past 30 years, and I think it was touched on initially about the most recent changes to both prosecution and to law enforcement with this bail reform that everybody's heard about and so much about. So the Rockland County Crime Analysis Center, I am the director of it. I was assigned back in 2017. In Clarkstown, I've had the honor of being there since '96. I've been through virtually every part of the police department there. So I've had the honor of being a detective for about 10 years, as well as street crime, plainclothes, community policing. So I've been through most of the investigative units there. And back in 2017, I was assigned to the Crime Analysis Center. At the time, it wasn't called that. We've subsequently changed the name to the Rockland County Crime Analysis Center. Briefly, the mission of the Crime Analysis Center is to collect, evaluate, and analyze and disseminate information and intelligence data regarding criminal and terrorist activity in Rockland County while following privacy and civil liberties safeguards. That's kind of important. We want to make sure everybody's rights are protected, but at the same time, getting the bad guys off the street. Virtually every case that was spoken about earlier, I'm so much better without a microphone. Virtually every case that was spoken about earlier, we've touched that case at the Crime Analysis Center, whether it was from backgrounds or tying pieces of the puzzle together. Those cases we've touched in some way with our crime analysts and our investigator and myself. The idea for the Crime Analysis Center, we realized years ago that Ramapo wouldn't talk to Clarkstown, Clarkstown wouldn't talk to Orangetown, Orangetown wouldn't talk to Stony Point. It was a source of frustration for me and some of my colleagues many years ago. So we realized that there has to be some sort of centralized location where the information can come in, but it can't be siloed. And by that I mean you can't protect the information. It has to be given out so police officers and investigators and prosecutors can be more effective in doing their job. And that's kind of been the goal of mine, to share information to put the bad guys away effectively. Our personnel is 2 crime analysts by the DA's office, and we have 1 drug analyst assigned to us from HIDA, and we'll talk about that in a moment. We have an investigator that's assigned from Clarkstown, as well as myself. So I put this up here, a 6/75 rule. It's 6% of the people, depending on the study that you listen to, 6% of the people are responsible for about 75% of the crime. So it's not really efficient nor effective to look at everybody in the population. We know who the bad people are that are causing a vast majority of the crime. So that's why we put together a briefing weekly and we target the people that are causing the most crimes in Rockland County. And we tell the police officers, investigators, and prosecutors a few times a week on what's going on and who's involved in what. So we also let probation officers know and parole officers know, because there's nothing worse than a police officer being on the street and running across the same guy who he knows is doing something, stopping him for a traffic infraction. He just arrested the guy 2 weeks prior. He's on parole or he's on probation, and he's doing the same things over and over and over again. That's a source of frustration for law enforcement, I know, for prosecutors, but now we give also parole and probation effective tools to say, hey, these guys are involved in these things, call them in for an interview. At least some sort of follow-up so they can do their jobs more efficiently, more effectively. So we know that this 6% of the people are causing a vast majority of this crime, so that's our focus, is on that 6% of people. Depending, it could be 8%, whatever. We talked earlier, I know Dominic Crispino talked earlier about the vast number of homicides. These are some of the numbers. I know it's difficult to read, but I'll just highlight the bottom. This is Dcjs, Department of Criminal Justice Services numbers. The homicides that I have outlined in yellow: murder, 2019, 8, 2020, 9. That's reported to Dcjs for Rockland County. Now, if you can see above that, before 2019 was 1, 2017 was 1, and 2016 was 2. So I think bail reform, COVID, whatever you want to call it, more bad guys being out on the street. I think the numbers for violent crime, as Dominic said earlier, way up. So again, 2014, we started this office. I was assigned in 2017. Really, the focus for us is to reduce, disrupt, and really prevent the crime that's going to happen by focusing on that 6% of the population that we know is doing the vast majority of crime. We have a partnership with New York, New Jersey, HIDTA. That's the high-intensity drug trafficking area. The analyst there tracks all the overdoses that was mentioned earlier by Tina. We have a crazy opioid epidemic in the country, and Rockland County is unfortunately no stranger to the victimization of the opioid crisis. We distribute and share a weekly local intelligence briefing to law enforcement, and our officers in the whole county write about 3,500 police reports a week. And our analysts read every single one of those police reports and cross-references it with offenders and people on probation, parole, and the like. So our analyst monitors narcotic and opioid overdose activity and provides statistics. I'll show you a chart that might open your eyes a little bit as to the extent of what's going on in this county with the opioid epidemic. Narcan use. Everybody's heard of Narcan? Okay, all the police officers in the county use Narcan. Narcan use is way up, which means there's more people that are surviving. We're saving more people's lives with Narcan. The officers that respond, they're using Narcan right away. Then the medics are using Narcan. We know from this past few years that approximately 15 to 20% of the people who are Narcaned at least one time are eventually going to die. So we know that we could save right now about 15 to 20% of the people that are Narcan by focusing on that small. There we go. I just fixed it. 15 to 20% of those people that have been Narcaned at least one time are eventually going to die. So we can focus on those people after they're Narcaned the first time. We could try to save those people. So that's a good start. Because we're not going to arrest our way out of this. I think that's been said before, and you might have heard that. So we got to seek alternatives to incarceration and to help these people with peers. And we're in the process of doing that with the DA's office. We provide technical case support and crime analysts with the investigators and crime analysts. We engage with all the crime analysis centers throughout the state and mental health associations. We have a partnership with FinCEN. If you haven't heard of FinCEN, it's the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. I'm actually very proud of this engagement. I think it's been the underutilized resource of Rockland County for a very long time. Now, Tina touched on some of the financial frauds that were going on. That is the tip of the iceberg. COVID, the PPP loans. I was discussing the PPP loans with the Inspector General's office. They will not review anything under $2 million. If you had a loan under $2 million and it was fraudulent, they're not going to look at it. They're not going to look at it. So that's their guideline, is $2 million, because so much money went out. So locally, we've been trying to review some of those PPP loans, because there is several that are fraudulent. So that's an avenue of investigation and partnership that the DA's office has recently engaged in, which is very exciting for the future, because there's tons of financial fraud out there, which means hopefully in the future, tons of financial seizures from those criminal activities. We also have a Tip 411 app, Rockland Co. DA. It's on Google Play and the App Store, and that gets about 200 tips per year that we then disseminate to different departments depending on where the location is of the tip. This is called the HIDA OD map. So that's as of 2 days ago, that was the amount of overdoses in Rockland County. Now our analyst puts this into an OD map that's available 24/7 to our mental health partners and law enforcement partners, and they could see where all of the overdoses are, and they could zoom in and see if there's any spike in any certain area. As you can see, there's a lot of different overdoses, fatal, non-fatal, Narcan, no Narcan, etc. So without too much, I know there's a lot of numbers on this chart. In 2021, year to date, I'll say as of yesterday, because I don't know what happened overnight yet, we had 50 overdose deaths in Rockland County this year. 50 overdose deaths in Rockland County this year. Last year, total, we had 42 for all of 2020, realizing it was COVID days, but we had 50 year to date. So we're going to exceed 65 this year if these numbers hold up. 65 people. Now before I said that 15 to 20% of the people who were Narcaned can be saved, or at least attempted to be saved, because we know that 15 to 20% of those people are going to eventually die. So if you take 15, the low number, 15% of 50 currently, that's some lives that we could save. And we know that based on the numbers from past years. So there's work to be done. The total overdose numbers is approaching 300. So these numbers are pretty staggering. It's well past last year and the year before. So there's a lot of work to be done. And I spoke earlier about the Tip 411 app. It's a wonderful tool for law enforcement, for the public. I know that the DA's office puts it out, and various police departments put it out on their different social media pages, and it's been well received by the public. A lot of people use their phones. We realized this several years ago when this started, that people don't want to call, but everybody has a cell phone. And if you're going to try to engage with the younger people, this is easy. It's just an app on your cell phone, and you can text. Everybody loves to text. Kids don't like to talk on the phone. Kids want to text. So we thought that this was a good way to engage with the younger people as well. So I appreciate your time, and I think the next presenter is Barbara Giunta.
I'll be speaking to you today about the Sei Bureau. SEI is just what we call Superior Court Informations. Basically, before I get into what we do and why we do it, I'd like to just let you know how a felony case is assessed in our office. every felony that happens in Rockland County, our office receives the paperwork. And our district attorney, Tom Walsh, and our chief assistant district attorney, Patrick Farley, personally reviews each and every felony case that comes into our office. And they make an initial assessment as to what is in the best interest of justice and how that felony should proceed. So we heard this morning from Nabila. She spoke about one avenue for a felony, and that's the grand jury. A second avenue is sometimes when a felony comes into our office, at initial review, it's determined that it doesn't quite live up to a felony level. And the DA and Chief Farley have absolutely relabeled cases down to misdemeanors, and those cases are reduced and prosecuted in our local justice courts by our justice court assistant district attorneys, who are really very, very hardworking and overwhelmed with all their cases. The third path for a felony is the Sei Bureau, and that is what I'm in charge of for the district attorney's office. A brief, okay, we did that. Okay. The purpose of the SCI is to streamline a felony charge. As Nabila spoke, typically a felony case is indicted by the grand jury. But in SCI, the prosecutor, the defense attorney, and a judge work collaboratively to try to determine a fair and speedy resolution of a felony case. Now, these are not the cases that Dom have spoken about. These are not the serious crimes that occur. When a felony comes in, we're looking for a defendant with a low-level criminal history or a case that there's no physical violence or physical injury. And we try to get quick, speedy, and just resolution of these cases. Another consideration that our office looks at is a defendant's background and mitigating factors that might be presented to us from defense attorneys. That the defendant may have a substance abuse issue or a mental health issue, and our office has alternative to incarceration programs, which Chuck Apothecary will be speaking about next. It allows the parties and the court to consider the facts, the circumstances of a case, to come up with an appropriate plea offer and a sentence. At the SCI, we are making sure that larceny victims get their restitution, victims of different crimes have orders of protection, and that the cases are appropriately handled in a quick fashion. Again, not every case is appropriate for the SCI Bureau. I've included examples, larcenies where we're seeking restitution, assaults where there's not significant criminal history with a person without a significant violence past, criminal mischief. Some of the cases that Kathleen spoke about, dealing with intimate partners, a lot of times a complainant may not want to pursue charges. The SVI unit does everything in their power to prosecute those cases when we can, even without the victim's cooperation, if it can be prosecuted based on evidence. But there's times that those crimes don't have a lot of additional evidence, and an SCI may be appropriate to allow justice to be served without having a victim of those crimes be traumatized further by having to be cross-examined at a trial by an aggressive defense attorney. An SCI can only be filed if there's a pending case in Rockland County, the district attorney consents to it, the defense attorney consents, and the defendant explicitly waives his or her rights to be prosecuted by a grand jury indictment. The participants in the SCI, as I indicated, are the assistant district attorney, defense attorney, and the judge. And in our office, we try to use this bureau as training grounds for our newer attorneys. It's many times the first time that they have experiences with investigating, assessing, and giving their legal opinion as to cases. That's done under my supervision. I sit with the newer prosecutors. We go over the facts, we go over the law, we go over what they think is appropriate, and then the case goes forward that way. So it's a simple process. It's a 3-step process. The first step is a court conference between defense counsel, prosecutor, and the judge. We consider restitution, we consider orders of protection. We come up with an appropriate plea offer, a recommended sentence, and then the second step, the defendant comes back into court with his or her attorney. They plead guilty on the record. They waive indictment by grand jury. And the third and final step is the sentencing date, where they come back, and most every time the sentence is exactly what was contemplated at the conference and at the plea. And the result is speedy and fair justice for the people of Rockland County, helps keep the cost down of prosecutions when it's appropriate. So thank you for hearing me out, and next I'm going to call up First Assistant District Attorney, Judge Chuck Apothecary.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm Chuck Apothecary. Most of you know me. Some of you who don't will get to know me through this. I head up the part of the office that deals with alternatives to incarceration. And it's more than alternatives to incarceration. It is trying to find a way to convince people charged with a crime that they're going to die from their addiction if they don't get into recovery and work recovery. And it's part of what we do is try to help people live longer because of this terrible epidemic we're going through, as Sergeant Lawrence spoke about. We went through some statistics. My statistics stopped at the end of September when we only had 48 people die of overdoses, with 138 being resuscitated with 3 months to go. Now we have 50 in the last couple of days. We had 2 more. One of whom, and I was speaking to Sergeant Lawrence about this, we see the statistics twice a week that Sergeant Lawrence produces. One person in last week's statistics was someone that survived an overdose, someone that I knew from my days as a drug court judge. And the next set of statistics, same person died from an overdose. So when you know somebody, and in Rockland County, it's hard not to know people that are dying of these overdoses and being resuscitated. So it really is a terrible epidemic that we're going through, overshadowed by the pandemic that we all have gone through over the past year and a half. And it didn't help, that pandemic didn't help people in recovery when they started to be isolated, and the only thing they could have at handy was liquor stores, which was considered to be what was it called, essential. So these are the 5 of them, and one on the next slide. I'm going to do this all at one time. First, we run to drug courts. I'm going to get into the differences between them. DTAP, which is another longer-term ATI, Mahati for mental illnesses, VADI, which is a veterans program, IDADI, which is for intellectually, developmentally disabled people, and the last one is Project Connect, which is our newest ATI, and again, we'll go over all of them one by one. So, the Misdemeanor Drug Court is a countywide program for nonviolent substance abuse disorder misdemeanor defendants who live here. They must meet legal eligibility. They must plead guilty to an agreed upon misdemeanor charge to enter the program. Each participant is assessed both by our ADAs for legal vetting, and also by our clinical people who see what their addiction is and how best to treat it. What they have to do, they have to be in treatment, they have to attend self-help meetings, they have to meet with their misdemeanor drug court case manager, and attend drug court sessions. That program is a minimum of 12 months. I say minimum because most people don't get through it in 12 months. They need a little bit more time. And the goal of the program is to modify the participants' behavior through incentives and sanctions, ensure that they remain drug and alcohol free by frequently testing them and randomly testing them, and assist them with educational work-related goals, resulting, hopefully, in a productive member of the community, one that's not using and not committing crimes. The misdemeanor drug court is 12 months, as I said, mostly takes longer. And that's currently running out of the town of Orangetown with Judge Loftus presiding. Felony drug court is operated by the Office of Court Administration. It has the similar requirements, except that the program is a minimum of 18 months. And that Judge Russo runs that now. Both programs permit DWI offenses. We started that in 2008 with the help of then County Executive Vanderhoff and Sheriff Kralik and former DA Tom Zuckerby. That's it. See,
As long as you get Tom out, it's
I
okay.
forgot. Tom Zuckerby. Anyway, it has proven one of the most valuable parts of the drug court because we're getting people in who would normally just go through the process, pay the fine, go to classes, and so on. But we have these people in drug court, and they're getting better. We have MAD on our side. They think it's a worthwhile program, and it has proven to be one of the best parts of our drug court. Next program is a drug treatment alternative to prison, which we call DTAP. It's an alternative to incarceration, focusing on chemically dependent, nonviolent felony offenders whose addiction is so acute that they require long-term treatment, long-term inpatient treatment. Now, it doesn't mean that our drug court people don't go to long-term inpatients as well, but they don't start off that way. These people are so in need that they have to go away first. Now, it's a minimum of 9 months in residential treatment, another 6 months in a community residential program, and they're under our supervision for at least 18 months. Again, a range of reduced sentencing is agreed upon if the participant successfully completes the program, and a significant downside sentence should they fail the program. And that's with all of our programs. You have an upside, generally a misdemeanor with 3 years probation, but a downside will mean either jail or prison in most cases. Next one is Mahadi for those people with serious mental illnesses or co-occurring disorders, which means mental illness and addiction that cannot be successfully treated in a drug court setting. This program has a minimum of 12 months for the misdemeanor cases and 18 months for felony cases. And again, each defendant must be legally eligible for it and clinically eligible for it with at least one serious mental illness, such as a mood disorder, anxiety disorder, or psychotic disorder. Individualized treatment plans are developed and supervised. Again, both sentences are negotiated prior to the person coming into the program. Now our veterans program, which started in 2009, where we partnered with the Rockland County Veterans Services Agency to develop this specialized alternative to incarceration programs just for veterans. Veterans have a unique set of issues. Those who definitely served in combat with PTSD and come back from overseas with those issues. And this program tends to match a veteran in the program with another veteran that may be in recovery. and it has been a very successful program, and again, it works the same way, an upside and a downside. The next is the alternative to incarceration for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, called Advocacy. This was something that was created by Judy Rosenthal in our office a number of years ago. It has been replicated all over the country since then. This is a difficult population because they're not going to get better. And so, because their disabilities do not go into remission. The program focuses on behavioral regulation, skills development, and environmental support. The program, we work closely with local community agencies to provide services for these people. The length of the program mirrors our other alternative to incarceration programs. Each participant is evaluated by a case manager to identify what services are needed to help them make the changes to their behavior that led to their arrest and to live a more successful life. The goal of this program is engagement and maintenance of appropriate behavior. And again, 12 months for a misdemeanor program and 18 months for a felony program. The last program, which is the most recent program, is a true diversion program. It's called Project Connect. Those of you on the legislature have heard about the program. We received a nearly $900,000 federal grant a year ago to start this program, which we named Project Connect. It's a quote, lead program that's all over the United States, used all over the United States. It provides a pathway to substance use treatment immediately following an arrest for Rockland residents charged with certain misdemeanors. The goal of the program is to connect those low-level substance use disordered offenders with treatment and peer services. For those who successfully engage with treatment, the charges are withdrawn. And for those folks who decline this program, we keep an eye on them, and as they go through the system, we can focus on them with any of our other alternative to incarceration programs.
So my name is Nick Nikolakis. I'm a supervising assistant district attorney here in Rockland County. Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about CPL 245 and e-discovery. So as you know, there was a dramatic change in the discovery laws back in 2020. They created a number of categories of discoverable information. Those categories are outlined in 245.20.21a through U. I'm going to touch just quickly on 245.21a, defendant statements. Now, defendant statements are something that we've always had to turn over, okay? It's not something new, but the statutory framework added a few wrinkles to it. For example, if our case is to pursue a case into the grand jury, we have to provide the defense counsel defendant statements within 48 hours. That seems simple enough, right? Well, it gets a little complicated. Now let me tell you about how defendant statements can be obtained. In one way, they can be obtained at the scene of the crime where the defendant is talking to the police officer. Another way they can be obtained is if the defendant is in the patrol car being transported from the scene of the crime to the police precinct. Another way that they can be obtained is at the police precinct where there's a video interrogation of the defendant. And now, because of the mandate that state police have to wear body cameras, defendant statements can also be captured through that means as well. So take your typical violent crime like a homicide or violent sex crime where the defendant is being held in on bail because it's a qualifying offense. We only have 5 days or sometimes 6 if the crime occurs on a Saturday or a holiday to present that case to the grand jury, or else the defendant will be released. That doesn't give us a lot of time. We have to be nimble and assertive, okay? We have to be able to determine if the defendant made statements, obtain those statements, then produce them to defense counsel all within a short period of time. This is all in addition to interviewing witnesses, speaking to police officers, reviewing documents, subpoenaing persons and medical records, all in preparation of our case. We, in addition, have to provide the defense statements within 48 hours of the presentation of grand jury. Now, I would love to speak to you about A through U in the same amount of detail. I'm not going to do that. I think that there's a clip that I'm going to play for you that does that better than I can.
What's all that? Trotter's files, all of them. You stole his files?
I didn't steal his files. Listen to this. I'm just ready to finesse him. I'm starting to finesse him, right? I got him going. He offers to have his secretary copy everything for me.
That's very impressive finessing.
That's not all. He's letting us use his hunting cabin as soon as he gets back. It's in the woods, it's quiet, he sleeps like a baby when he's there.
Terrific, you're a hell of a bondo.
What's this? You reading this book?
Yeah.
Do me a favor, okay? Don't read this book. Okay? Thank you very much.
All right. Don't you want to know why Trotter gave you his files?
I told you why already.
He has to. By law, you're entitled. It's called disclosure. He has to show you everything, otherwise it could be a mistrial. He has to give you a list of all his witnesses. You can talk to all his witnesses. He's not allowed any surprises. They didn't teach you that in law school either?
Like I said, I think that does a much better job of describing the statutory framework than I could. So what did we develop to deal with this new statutory framework? We worked together with this group called NIPT, the New York Prosecutors Training Institute. Some agencies, the ones in the city, the bigger agencies, have their own discovery systems. They can pay for them, they can afford them. We work with NIPT to use their front end and their back end to support our discovery. So what we did was we created an arrest notification system. Prior to this arrest notification system, the way we learned about a case was the assistant district attorney would go to their respective jurisdiction, they would go into their mailbox, they would pull out the files, and they would learn about the case. That case would be brought back to our office, it would be entered into our front end, PCMS, and then that's how we learned about a case. Or they would learn about it at arraignment, or sometimes when there was an offer hours arraignment, they would learn about it on the second appearance of the defendant. Now what's the PCMS? What's the prosecutor's case management system? It's basically our front end. It gives us information like the defendant's name, the defendant's date of birth, the charges, the defense attorney, the procedural posture of a case, some of the notes that have been going along with the case or our investigation. That's what our front end does. It does for us, it tells us. It works also with our back end, the digital evidence management system. This is basically a database. It holds all of our photos, our videos, our police reports, everything, right? So this is what we use to serve and produce discovery to defendants. Now, how does this all work? Well, here are our agencies in Rockland County, okay? And this is what represents the Rockland County District Attorney's Office. The first thing that happens is an arrest notification is sent to the office of the Office of the District Attorney. Now, because of the arrest notification portal, any police officer in Rockland County can send it either at a terminal at their precinct, they can send it from their patrol car, at a laptop, they can even send it from their phone. So we know instantaneously an arrest has been made, and that's critical considering the deadlines that we're under. We send them an e-discovery or what we call a DEMS link. With that DEMS link, they upload files to our office. From there, an assistant reviews the files, determines whether or not any redactions need to be made, and then produces them to defense counsel. So I want to talk to you a little bit about what we learned about that upload, what we learned about data.
You're going to need a bigger boat.
We're gonna need a bigger boat. And that couldn't be more true, okay? So here are our data statistics. Our DEM system went live on October 2019. We had no data. In January of 2021, we had 18.76 terabytes of data. The blue and the orange represent active and archived data, okay? By October 2021, we had 29.19 terabytes of data. Now, what's a terabyte of data, okay? A terabyte of data is 1,700 hours of music, 1,000 hours of video, or 40 days of video, 310,000 photos, or 500 hours worth of movies. That's a lot of data. And what is my prediction? My prediction is that in about 2 or 3 years, we'll be at a petabyte of data. A petabyte is 1,024 terabytes. That's a lot of information. Not only to store and hold and access, but to review. Our assistants have to review all of that data. That's a lot. So we're trying to be nimble, we're trying to be assertive, and we're working towards handling all of that information. Thank you, and if you have any questions, please contact me. My contact information is right there, my cell phone, my email address, everything's right there. I want to thank all of the presenters for presenting great presentations. I want to thank District Attorney Walsh, Chief Frawley, Barbara Gianta for putting this all together. Thank you all so much for coming. Chief, District Attorney Walsh?
Great job, Lieutenant Ramapo, for being a good host. And I just want you to know, legislators, elected officials, this is just the brief, short summary of what we do. If you want, we'll give you a full show at some other time, but we'll need you to block out a couple days. So thank you so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed, and more importantly, I hope that you've learned about the Rockland County District Attorney's Office and the wonderful staff that we have. If you do have the time, please talk to the staff, get to know them. They are really concerned and dedicated to Rockland County. They work very hard, and if nothing else, they're really good people. Thank you all for coming.